This week's Parashat is Parashat Mishpatim. And of course, now the more technical, detail-oriented, legal minutia of the Torah begins in earnest. Up until now, we had Parashas Sefer Bereshis, describing Brias Ha'olam and the Aves, and then we went to Sefer Shemais, and half of Sefer Shemais describes, of course, the Galus and the Geula of Mitzrayim. And now in this week's Parsha, we begin to roll up our sleeves and get involved in the more intricate details of halacha, of Choshen Mishpat, etc. And Rashi points out that there's a smichos of Parashas Ve'ela Mishpatim, the Parashas Hadinim. There's a connection between this parsha and the end of last week's parsha of Yisrael, which described the Mizbeach. And the Smichas HaParsha, says Rashi, is to teach us Shetasim Sanhedrin Eitzel HaMikdash, that the Makom of Sanhedrin, the seat of the Bestin, the place that the Supreme Court of Klal Yisrael sits, must be in the Lishkas HaGazis, right next door to the Makom HaMikdash. That's why we have a Smichas HaParshias between the Mizbeach and the Ve'ela HaMishpatim. And of course, the way the Mefarshim explain this Rashi is quite simple, and that is that Jews don't look at halacha. We don't look at the legal process and all of the many laws that are involved in the Torah HaKadosh as being merely jurisprudence. We don't look at them as being ways in which to govern, ways in which a society functions. Of course they are. But they're not merely that. For that we don't need Rabbanim to be Dayanim. We could have regular Supreme Court justices, regular people that are lawyers, that are jurists. But the Torah is telling you that in order to understand halacha, in order to understand the Mishpatim Hashem, you have to have Kedusha. You have to have Torah. You have to have an understanding that everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that decides and who rules, and it's not governed by human logic. Human logic does not play a role in the process. Of course it does, in the sense of the fact that Rabbanim shape and mold the concepts of the Torah HaKadosh api their das and api their shikol hadas. But in terms of the actual source and origin of the law, it comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's infused with Kedusha. It's infused and invested with a holiness that can only come from the Mikdash. Sanhedrin must sit next to the Mikdash because the Mikdash is what drives the Sanhedrin. I wanted to be Meisif. I wanted to add one Nekuda to this Chazal, to this Rashi, as follows. The last pasuk in Parshas Yisrael, dealing with the Mizbeach, speaks about how Laisala b'malais al mizbechi asher laisigala arvascha alav, don't have steps. Do not have a staircase to get to the top of the Mizbeach. You don't want to do that. Why? Because you shouldn't be megala your erva. The private parts of the kohen, as he's going and doing his avodah, should not be exposed to the Mizbeach. To be zayin for the Mizbeach. Rashi points out, of course, it still would not really be exposed because the kohen wore pants, the kohen wore stockings. There were things that separated, of course, the kohen's erva from the Mizbeach. But still, it's close enough. If the kohen would walk up the steps to get to the top of the Mizbeach, that would show and reveal to the Mizbeach the Gilui Erva, and that we don't want. So you have to build a ramp, And that way the Kohen can make small steps and not have to expose his erba to the Mizbeach. And Rashi says that it's a kal v'chaimer. We are supposed to take from this pasuk a kal v'chaimer. Uma abonim halalu she'ein b'hem das lahakpid al bizyonon. Madach, these stones of the Mizbeach that have no das, it's an inanimate object, it's not going to blush, it's not going to be offended, it's not going to be embarrassed if it would see the erba of the Kayin. Amra Taira Hayal V'yesh B'hem Tzarech like Tineg B'hem Mineg B'Zayin. But it's an important part of the Mikdash. It's an important part of the Mizbeach. Treat it respectfully. Don't embarrass it. Don't humiliate it. Don't show it something that's inappropriate for it to see, because it has an importance. Chaveirecha shu b'dmus yitzrecha. Your friend, a human being who is created in the image of Hashem, umakbid al bizyaynai. He does have a heart. He does have sensitivities. He does blush. So for him, alachas kama v'kama, we have to be careful not to be nayeg minag bizayin. That's the yisai. This is a principle that we learn at the end of Parashat Yisrael by the Mizbeach. And I think that we might be able to bridge the two parashas and to understand how that lesson, that all-important lesson in Ben Adam L'Chaveira that we learn from the Mizbeach, applies to the Mishpatim Hashem. All of the Mishpatim Hashem are governed not just merely by a deterrence factor, which many of Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence is built upon. You want to make the laws tough. You want to fine a person. You want to make sure that he doesn't do it again. You want to make a person afraid to do it in the first place. That might have some place, but that's not the full, all-encompassing mission of the Mishpatim Hashem, but rather every single mishpat, as strict and as just as it may be, always will be having a component and an element of chesed and care, not to humiliate the criminal. He's a criminal, but don't humiliate him. Don't be nayeg mineg bizayin. Be careful for his kavod. He might be a person that has done a terrible act, whatever the act may be. But just like the Mizbeach, we have to be careful not to be nayeg mineg bizayin with the Mizbeach. So the Mishpatim in this week's parasha also are all woven within every Mishpat, within every sif in Shulchan Aruch, a compassion for the human condition. The Gemara in Baba Kama and Daf Lamed Amud Aleph says, Hayman debai l'mehave chasida. If a person wants to be a chassid, if a person wants to be somebody who is a fine, kind, pious individual, a person who is nayeg lefnim mishuras hadin, a wonderful human being, you know how you are able to become a chassid. So you think, learn Musar, learn machshava svarim, learn chassidish svarim. That's how I'd be a chassid, right? The Gemara says no. The last thing that you would think to learn, that's what the Torah says, that's what the Gemara says to learn. If you want to know how to be a chassid, the Gemara says, L'kayem mili d'nezikin. Learn Choshen Mishpat. Learn Bava Kama, learn Bava Metzia, learn Bava Basra, learn Sanhedrin, learn Makis. If you want to be a chassid, that's the first place to look. And you scratch your head and say, why? Maybe if I want to, be a dayan. Maybe if I want to be a lawyer. Maybe if I want to be a tayin in a bestin, that's when I should learn Hilchas Nezikin. I want to be a chassid. Chasidus is learned from Nezikin. And of course the answer is yes. If we're able to dissect the laws of Nezikin what we're going to see is the sensitivity that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had for the Mizbeach, for an inanimate object, is all found in every single halacha in Choshen Mishpat. Nezikin teaches us and molds us into being better human beings, ben adam l'chaveroi, because it enforces how important it is to make sure that a human being remains whole and feels good about himself and is not embarrassed and is not humiliated. Let's start, just as an example, right off the bat. Right out of the gate, the very first halacha after Ve'ela Mishpatim, Asher Tasim Lefneim, these are the laws that the judges of Klal Yisrael are supposed to place before the people. Or Moshe Rabbeinu and the Zekanim are supposed to give over, Rashi says, like a Shulchan Aruch. Place it nicely before them, lay it out before their eyes, let them see and understand clearly all of the halachas. What's the first halacha in Mishpatim? The first halacha is about an Eved Ivri. Ki sikne Eved Ivri. You're going to buy an Eved Ivri. Sheish shanim yavad. He works 6 years. Uvashvi yetze lachav shichinam. And after the 6 years are over, the 7th year you send him home. Now, who is this talking about? How do you become an Eved Ivri? You think people are born into servitude? How does a person become an Eved Ivri? Rashi says that there are 2 ways that you become an Eved Ivri, and our parsha is talking about one of the 2 ways, and that is if a person steals. A person's a ganef, and he's busted, he's caught being a ganef, and he can't afford to pay back whatever he owes. He has to pay either Karen, Kefel, he has to pay back money, he doesn't have the money. What do? So Bestin goes and sells him as an Eved so that he can repay the loan. Which is stamapella, that you're going to take a ganef into your house. Would anyone want to buy let's say, I'm looking for a cleaning lady. If anyone knows him, no. If a person is looking for a cleaning lady and somebody says, I have a great cleaning lady for you. Oh yeah, what's her, tell me a little bit about her. Okay, she stole from me about $3,000. She took my best jewelry and, and once in a while she'd take a lot of schnapps from my cabinet. Would you say, oh great, when can she start? She's the last person that you want working in your house. An Eved Ivri is a ganef. And the Torah says, this is how you treat a ganef. You sell him as an Eved. Okay, fine, maybe you treat him as an Eved. You put him in solitary confinement. And, you keep cameras on him day and night, making sure he doesn't go anywhere. And you throw him down into his pit. You throw him down some of your leftover scraps. That's how you treat a ganef. I mean, if you've been reading the papers at all, seeing the news, last week there was a story about how Iran has contributed greatly to the world technology. Everybody's busy, trying to find the cure to cancer and the cure to other diseases and to make life easier. Iran came up with a gewaltige invention. They made a finger amputation machine for ganavim. That's what they invented. What does that mean? In Arab countries, when a person steals, they take his hand and they cut off his hand. That's the knas for a ganav. That's why the crime rate in Arab countries is extremely low. Because you don't want to get caught in Arab countries stealing, because you lose your hand. An eye for an eye. They take that very literally. So they came up with a machine. You put your hand in the machine, and there's like a motorized saw goes and cuts the person's fingers off. That's the achzarius that certain people look to a ganef as. They treat a ganef, and maybe you would think that makes sense. The ganef's a ganef. Meaning it's very nice for me to sit up here and stand up here and talk about other ways of looking at a ganef. But when your ox is gored, as they would say, and when you were the one that was robbed, if you have a car which was broken into and they took your stereo or they took your GPS, which happened to me several times already, you're not so happy about the ganef. So maybe you say, Taka, Iran is not the craziest place in the world. Maybe it makes sense. Maybe, they should do that here also. Let's look at the way the Torah views what to do with a ganef. You sell a ganef to somebody who takes him in as an eved for 6 years into his house. But you treat him not like you would think that you would treat a ganef. Let's see how the Rambam says we should treat our ganef. The Rambam is in Hilchas Avodim, Perek Aleph, Halacha Tes. Kol eved ivri ay ama ivriya, chayev ha'adam lashvaisan elav. Every eved ivri, or an ama ivriya, you buy her, you buy him, you take him in, you don't buy him, but you take him into your house, and what do? You have to treat him as your equal. In what? B'meichel. If you go and you order Chinese for supper, you don't say, okay, we'll give him the leftover cholent from Shabbos. It's Thursday already. We're going to give him Shabbos' leftover cholent. But no, you have to order from him. You have to say, hey, Chaim, what would you like from the Chinese restaurant? We're ordering Chinese. Oh, I would like some mugugai pan and a little hot and sour soup, and an egg roll would be really nice. Okay. Uve mashke, the Rambam says, you have to give him whatever you're drinking. You're drinking Coke, you got to give him Coke. You're drinking Woodford, you got to give him Woodford. Whatever it is you're drinking, you got to share that drink with him. Biksus. You go shopping to a very fine department store. You're getting a new suit for Shabbos. You have to bring him with you. Whatever suit you get, you got to give it to him also. Buy him too. Uvim madur. And your living quarters. If you're living in a nice house, you got to give him an equally nice room with a nice bed, with the air conditioning in the summer and heat in the winter. Whatever you're doing for yourself, you have to do to him, as the pasuk says, Ki taiv lai imach. It has to be good for him, like it is with you. Imach, with you. You and him are like brothers. But you know what? You're not like brothers. He's really more than you. You know why? Because let's say you only have one bed. Let's say you only have one really nice bed, and then you have a sleeping bed. Who gets the sleeping bed? You get the sleeping bed. The Eved gets the bed. Because if you give the Eved the sleeping bed, you're going to be over this halacha. And then it says, you can't eat a fancier bread than him. You can't drink a fancier wine than him. You got to sleep on the same linen. You got to sleep in the same exact way, as the Gemara says and Kedushin says, the Rambam. Mikan amru kalakaina eved ivri kekaina adain la'atzmai. If you're kaina and eved ivri, you're not kaina and eved ivri. You're not really buying an eved ivri. You're buying an adain. You're acquiring for yourself a master. That's how the Torah Kedusha says to treat an eved ivri. V'chayev linag bay minag achva. You have to treat him with brotherly love and respect. That's the way an eved ivri gets. Who are we talking about over here? We're not talking about a chashav rav that happens to be staying over at your house for Shabbos. We're talking about a prasta ganef. We're talking about a simple ganef who has been stealing from people. He wasn't so concerned about other people's care and well-being. I have a Talmud who, they live in a beautiful house. I stayed there once at a chasna, and Rahman al-Islam, the family went away for a night to a chasna, and they came, not that chasna that I was at, and when they came home, their whole house was cleaned out. A beautiful house with many, many beautiful, over $100,000 worth of things were stolen. So ganef, they did a professional job. They cut the wires, and they had the phone lines and everything. They did it perfectly. They came back from the chasna. They found they were broken. You know what it's like to be stolen? You know how even if they steal nothing, if somebody breaks into your house, you feel like so violated. Like you're coming into even if somebody comes into your car, it's like, this is my car, what are you doing in here? But if somebody comes into your house and rummages through all your drawers and takes cash and takes jewelry and takes all the things that you worked so hard to acquire, it's a very big patch. But the Torah says you take this ganef and you don't amputate his fingers. What you do is you're nayeg with him chesed. That's what the chinuch says. The yesod of the mitzvah of Eved Ivri is to teach us And the lashon of the chinuch is Ki mitechach tochel habracha aleim v'achesed v'arachamim min amidas ha'mishbach shabaylam v'alkeni ziruna l'rachem, that you have to be merachem on this eved because he's tachas yadeinu v'ligma lanu chesed. Give him chesed. Bestow, shower upon this eved chesed. Chesed. For this guy who stole and made people's lives miserable, we're supposed to teach chesed? Yes. That's the Mishpatim Hashem. That's the Mizbeach. Don't be noyeg a minig be zayin with him. Machru best in Yisrael as Evan Ivri kitayv imach b'machal imach b'mishteh imach b'ksus. You have to be noyeg. Treat him like a human being. Why? You know why? Because the Torah doesn't look at a human being the way we look at a human being. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't look at somebody superficially on the surface and instantly make a snap decision. Oh, he's a ganef, he's got to be fried, you have to put him in the electric chair, you have to put him in jail for the rest of his life, you have to treat him disgusting, you have to brand him, and as in ganef, you have to tar and feather him, make sure that every single person knows what he is and that he will never ever forget what he has done. That's not what the Torah says. The Torah looks at it a little differently. The Torah says, wait a minute. Here we have a human being. He's Nivra B'Tselem Elokim. Let's try to understand a little bit the psychology. What would make a person be a ganef? Why is it that most people are not ganavim? Most people are very nice, upstanding citizens that do their work and they pay their taxes and they go to school and they get a job and they raise a family and they do everything on the uppity up. Why is it that there are yechidim that are ganavim? You know why it is? Maybe, just maybe, it's because he didn't have the homes that we had. We were brought up, Baruch Hashem, hopefully, in a warm home, in an honest home, in a home that we're treated like a mensch. We were raised with certain expectations. We were given nice clothing and nice food. We were made to feel good about ourselves, right? When we were raised as little princes. And we were expected to do well in life, and we were given every opportunity, and our parents gave us enough money to get through school and to be able to go to college and to be able to get a career and be able to earn a nice price. Not everybody has that. Maybe, just maybe, had we been put into that matzah that he was brought up in, we would also be ganav and Rachmana litzlan. How do you know? So the Torah says, don't right away castigate and punish a person immediately and call him a ganef. First, let's rehabilitate him. Let's get him a nice house to live in. Let's find him a nice adin. Let him be dressed like a mensch with a suit of the adin. Let him eat the same food. Let him sit at the table eating Chinese food with the rest of the family. Let him drink a little wine. Let him be made to feel like a mensch. Let him not have bizyainis for a couple of years in his life. And then, just then, maybe, after 6 years of feeling good about himself, we can put him back on the street and he can be a wonderful human being like everybody else. That is the Mishpatim Hashem. That's the way the Torah views din. Not as, I don't want to hear about what his story is, I couldn't care less, he's a ganef, he was caught, we have him on videotape, let us cut off his fingers, that's it. That's a deterrent, that's going to be the psak on him, and I don't care, no rachmanis. The Mishpatim Hashem, Melech, Oyev, Tzedakah, Mishpat. What does that mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves Mishpat. He loves Mishpat. But he also loves tzedakah. Tzedakah means be charitable. Be merciful. Be a little kind-hearted. Don't be cruel when you're judging. Judge with Mishpat. You have to judge by the letter of the law, but the letter of the law has to have within it a component of tzedakah. If it's just Mishpat, if you're just a cruel judge, then you're not doing what the Torah wants. The Torah wants us to be judging properly, but that the judgment should be sugar-coated with chesed and with tzedakah and with rachamim. That's the way the Torah wants it, because the Torah doesn't look at people like we do. The Torah doesn't make snap decisions. The Torah is looking at the human condition and how to nurse back to normalcy a human being that Nebuch had to become a ganef. There's a lot of maises with ganavim, especially in Hasidic Svarim. You find the way. This is mamish. This is a hashkafa of the Torah when it comes to ganavim. You know, the Baal Shem Tov, people used to go to the Baal Shem and ask him for brachas and to daven for certain nitzrachim. And one time a person came to the Baal Shem and said, "I have a very sick child, and he's very, very sick. The doctors don't know what to do. He needs a very big Yeshua. Could you daven for him?" And the Baal Shem Tov assembled a minyan to daven for this sick child. Who did he call for the minyan? So you think he'd call like the Mayetzes Kedei Le'atayra, he'd get all the big tzaddikim of the dar together in one room and daven. So the story goes, the Baal Shem called in all the ganavim in the town. A minyan of ganavim. And he said, let's daven for this chayla. Let's daven for this child. And Taka, the child was healed. And they asked the Baal Shem, why'd you call a minyan of ganavim? Why punkt ganavim? I mean, there are a lot of rabbis in town also that are not ganavim. So he said, this was a very difficult case. He says, I saw that the gates of Shamayim were locked. They were locked. My tefillas were not able to get through those gates. I needed to call ganavim because the ganavim were the only ones in town that knew how to pick a lock. What does that story mean? That story means that sometimes ganavim are really wonderful people. It's just Nebuch that they weren't brought up the way we were. They didn't have the same background as we do. But there's a lot of beauty inside of a ganef. You just have to be able to scrape away the bad, and you'll find beauty. They could pick a lock in Shamayim that maybe other people can't. And never, ever throw away anybody. Everybody has a hidden beauty and a hidden kayach that you cannot at all abandon. You have to make sure to rehabilitate a ganef. Make sure that a ganef is once again made to feel whole. That's our job. That's what the Torah Kedosha wants from us. One time, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Ditchev was attacked by a fierce ganef, an armed bandit, Listim Mizuyim, attacked Rabbi Yitzchak, the great Sanigari of Klal Yisrael, the defender of Klal Yisrael, the Melitz. He always saw the good in every Yid. And this ganef said to Rabbi Yitzchak, your money or your life. And Rabbi Yitzchak looks at the ganef and he smiles. And he says to the ganef, says, you don't know how much I am mekane you. I'm jealous of you. So you're unbelievable. So I'm unbelievable. Your money, your life. Hey, mister, you heard me? I want the money. Now. He says, no, I'm jealous of you. He says, why are you jealous of me? You're a rabbi. See the beard? You're a big rabbi. He says, what do I have? I'm a ganef. I run from person to person. I make their life miserable. People are afraid of me. I steal from people. What are you jealous of me for? You're a righteous person. I'm a terrible person. Rabbi Yitzchak looks at him and says, the Gemara says that if a person does tshuva, zdainais, nasis, kizchuyais, a person that does tshuva, his averis become mitzvahs. All of the averis that you do with tshuva is like an Othello game. You're able to turn all the pieces over from black to white. You're able, every single Aveira that you've done, every single Aveira that you've done is a mitzvah. He says to the Ganef, you have by your own admission done many Aveiros in your life. If you would do tshuva, do you know how great you would be? Do you have any idea of how many mitzvahs you would have in an instant? If you'd only do tshuva, all of your Aveiros become schuyos. Says me, I have a couple of mitzvahs, I have a couple of Aveiros, but nothing special. You have millions of Aveiros, you could have millions of mitzvahs if you just do tshuva. And the Ganef did tshuva. We look at a Ganef with our fleshy eyes as a low-life beast, a terrorist, somebody that does not deserve to live, somebody that should be put in a jail cell and made to rot there the rest of his life. There is no kapara for a Ganef in our eyes. We would never hire a cleaning lady that was a Ganef because I don't want to take a chance on her. The Torah says, take that chance. Give the Eved Ivri a chance. Bring him into your house. Ima b'maichol, ima b'mishteh, ima b'ksos. Give him whatever you have. 6 years, says the Torah. After 6 years, let's see what becomes of him. Let's put him in this greenhouse for 6 years and watch him grow. Watch him develop into a functional human being. Let him out on the street and let him have a family again. Let him live a normal life. Let him be happy. Let him be honest. There is greatness in a Ganef. Don't look at him merely as a Ganef. You don't know what he went through. You're pasking on him. You're being nayeg, imay, minig, bizayin. That's not what I want. If you look in Rabbi Yerucham's Sefer on this week's Parashat, he says a very similar yisaid that I said, lahavdil, but he says it a little bit later in the Parashat. He says it by the Parsha of Daled Vehei. We know that if a Ganef steals a shar or a seh, he has to pay 4 or 5 times the amount of that shar or seh. But if it's a shar, then you have to pay what? You have to pay 5 times. If it's a seh, you pay 4 times. Why? Chazal explain, because a seh, the Ganef had to put the seh on his shoulders, and the seh was like sort of kicking, and it's embarrassing for the Ganef to have to walk through the streets carrying a seh. The shar is more balabatish. The shar, you pull like, you look like a mensch. You're not putting it on your shoulders, not running away. You just pull it, and everything is good. So for the shar, you pay 5. We'll throw the book at you. For a seh, we'll take off a little bit. You get a deduction. It's a sale. You steal a seh, we give you a discount. Why do we give you a discount? Because you suffer bizyanis. Fracture of Yerucham Akasha. Wait a minute. What's going on over here? Who are we talking about? We're talking about a Ganef. We're talking about a low-life, primitive Ganef who is a threat and a menace to society. And for him, we give him a deduction of a 5th because he had to suffer a little bizyanis that he's schlepping a sheep on his back. I mean, are we crazy? Rabbi Yerucham says, like sarcastically, I guess, he says the equivalent would be, you know what the equivalent would be? If, let's say, the judge is pasking on a Ganef, that a Ganef, I'm about to decide on the Ganef, and then in my cheshbainis, the Ganef says, wait a minute, Your Honor, can I say something in my defense before you tell me how many years in jail I have to spend? Okay. What would you like to say? Were you an orphan? Are you a widow? Like, what are you? He says, no. The ladder that I carried to break into the guy's house was very heavy for me. A very, very heavy ladder. And you know something? I think I broke a fingernail because I carried that ladder. And I really was like so heavy for me. I think I should get less jail time because the ladder that I was carrying was a little heavy. The judge is going to fall out of his seat. He's going to scream at this guy. Are you crazy? That's like the definition of chutzpah. The Welt says that the definition of chutzpah is that a person kills his parents and then he pleads mercy from the judge because he's an orphan. That's the definition of chutzpah. And that's what's going on here. Judge, you have to let me off easy, take off a fifth, give me a hanacha. Why? Because I had a little bit of busha. When I carried that sheep on my back, like people were like laughing at me. I think some person was giggling when he saw me schlepping the sheep. You stole a sheep! Busha b'zaynis for a ganef? Are you kidding me? Zakter Birucham, this is how the Torah, the Mishpatim Hashem, is completely different than what they teach you in law school. I once had a Rabbi who said, don't become a lawyer. Not because of the reasons that people commonly think you shouldn't go to law school for. First of all, that there's no jobs out there to be had. Second of all, the hours are ridiculous. And, it's very expensive, and it's not a good lifestyle. Whatever, that's not the cheshbon. That's fine. You have to make parnasa, you do whatever you can. He says, but by going to law school, he said, what you're doing is you are ruining your sensitivities in terms of the legal, the fineness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Mishpatim. We're used to in yeshiva learning about Mishpatim Hashem, and we have like a fineness that we relate. When we're thinking about halacha, we look at it with a beauty, with a yofi. And the legal Gaisha jurisprudence says they look at it exactly the opposite. They look at it, whatever the Torah says, the legal system says probably the opposite. They don't have this insight into the human condition. They paskin one size fits all. If you're a ganef, you get this. If you're ma'anis somebody, you get that. And if you kill somebody, you get that, and that's it. There's very little room for compassion, at least not the compassion that the Torah tells us to have. And that's why would you want to ruin the fine calibration that the Torah HaKadosh gives in our minds in terms of justice? What we define as justice will be polluted and distorted if you go through 3 years of listening to what the Gaisha concept of justice is. But Rabbi Rucham says that that's the Mishpatim Hashem. The Mishpat and the Tzedakah braided together like a Havdalah candle. Mishpat and Tzedakah. It's not just Mishpat. It's Mishpat coupled, married to Tzedakah. Melech, Ayed, Tzedakah, Mishpat. You want to have Mishpat? Wonderful. You have to have Tzedakah with it. You can't have just Mishpat without infusing it with the Kedusha of the Torah, with the Kedusha of the Mizbeach, like Tineg by Mineg Bizayin. That's what the Parashat of Mishpatim is all about. Every human being is a Mizbeach. You have to try to see the neshama of the person and don't right away passel him on the basis of the report, of the edus. You have to listen to the edus. And you have to pass on the person, but there has to be a midas harachamim. There has to be a chesed that shines through the din. I wanted to expand the var to make it a little bit more practical for us, because we're not dayanim yet. We're not paiskim yet. So the din is sort of interesting, and it's sort of, we could take a lesson from it, but there's something much more directly impacting on us if we listen a little bit further. There's a Gemara in Eruvin. The Gemara in Eruvin says, Rabbi Akiva says, how do you know that a person is chayev to teach his talmidim enough times until he knows it? And the Gemara brings a pasuk, and the Gemara says, how do you know that you have to teach him enough times? Shechayev laharis like panim. You have to teach it well. You have to teach patiently. And it brings a pasuk from our parsha, Shenemar ve'ela Mishpatim asher tasim lefneim. These are the laws that you have to place in front of them. And what this means to say is that when a person has a Talmud, or when a person has a Chavrusa, you have to be able to be patient with that person. You can't right away say, you don't understand? We're moving on. You don't understand? That's a klotz kasha. I remember when I was in high school, I had a Rabbi who used to say, and this is why it took me many years before I agreed to take this position here. He used to say, every time a guy would ask a bad kasha, he didn't say it's a klotz kasha. That other of my Rabbi used to say. He used to say, you will send to college. You will send to, if you ask a klotz kasha, the worst thing in my high school that a person could be, the worst thing, you go to college. That's your einish. Your einish for asking a klotz kasha, we'll send you to college. Many Rabbeim suffer from the fact that they never learned that Gemara in Eruvin. If the Gemara maybe would have been in Brachas, they would know it. So in the middle of Eruvin, Nun Daled, person has to be noyeg a minute covered with his Talmidim. A person has to be patient with his Talmidim. A person has to love his Talmidim. A person can never be mevazeh a Talmud. There's a famous Vart, I don't know who said it, but he said that the reason why Rosh Yeshivas a lot of times have to go on trips, very often to collect money. Many yeshivas, many Rosh Yeshivas had to go around, instead of giving shiurim all day, unfortunately they were saddled with the financial responsibilities of the institution, had to go running around from balabas to balabas, from person to person, finding money for the yeshiva. And it was mentioned, why is that? Why shouldn't Rosh Yeshivas be able to just sit and give shir, b'menucha? So it's a sharp vart. But the vart is that a lot of times Rabbeim mistakenly are mevazeh Talmidim. They embarrass Talmidim, sometimes b'yadim, sometimes below yadim. And when you're mevazeh somebody, you're really killing that person. When you're mevazeh a person, you're killing a person. We know that. And so, it's b'shaygeg. You're killing somebody b'shaygeg. What's the chiyuv of somebody who kills b'shaygeg? What's the einish? You have to go into galus. The reason why many people have to go into galus is because many people have been destroyed through chinuch. Many kids that are at risk, if you ask them what turned you off from Yiddishkeit, many of them, Rabbi Rabbi will tell you, and I'm not saying it's the only reason, I don't even know if it's the true reason, but they'll tell you that they had a rabbi or several rabbeim that were not nice. They abused them verbally, physically, whatever it may be, and because of that, they were noyeg, mineg, bizayin. It's not for me. I don't want Yiddishkeit. I don't want the Torah. I don't want the Rabbeinu Shalom. If that's what Yiddishkeit is, I don't want it. Ve'ela Mishpatim asher tasim of them. You have a Talmud. You treat him like a mensch. You're masber leipanim. You don't embarrass him. You give him your time and your patience and your love. The Gemara there in Eruvin says a very famous story about an Amira by the name of Rav Preda. Rav Preda had a Talmud who taught out a shvacha cup, a weak head, as weak comes. And in order to teach him a Mishnah, he didn't have to repeat it twice. He didn't have to go over it with him 10 times. He went over it 400 times until the Talmud was finally able to absorb the simple Mishnah. Not exactly a tremendous intellectual heavyweight, this Talmud. 400 times, and Rav Preda was a tremendous Talmud Chacham. He was an Amayra. He had the patience and the love. Eila Mishpatim asher tasim of them. Imamish was masbir leipanim, patiently, with love, with affection, with time, with dignity. I'm giving over again and again and again. You don't got it yet? Again, nacham. The Gemara says one day in the middle of this tutoring lesson, this 400 time tutoring lesson, somewhere in the middle, let's say by the 215th time that they were chazering, there was like some Talmidim or some Rabbanim that came into the room and said that, the Rosh Shiva prayed, we're calling, there's a special meeting, and the Mayat says, you have to go. He says, oh, I'm teaching a Talmud right now. So, but it's a big emergency. When I'm finished with the Talmud, then I'll come out to the meeting, not a minute before. And so they continued, they learned the Mishnah 400 times, and at the end, this Talmud says, Rabbi, I'm sorry, I still don't get pshat on the Mishnah. So he says, how come every day you get pshat after 400 times and not today? He says, because when those guys came in, and you said that, you have to leave soon, I got nervous, and I always felt that you're about, you have one foot out the door already. I didn't have the menuchas hanefesh to really allow it to seep in because, I'm always like, no, I always have that on the back of my mind that you're going to leave in a minute. So Rabbi says, no problem. Let's do it all over again. He started over again, another 400 times with the Talmud. And the Gemara says that at that moment the Baskol came down and says, this Rabbi is such a tzaddik and such a Rebbe par excellence. We'll give you a choice. Door number 1 has behind it a 400-year extension on your life. Door number 2 is that you can get your entire generation into Olam Haba. What do you want? Door number 1, door number 2. So I'll take door number 2. I want the entire generation to get into Olam Haba. So the Baskol says, no, we'll give you both. You get both. This is the illustration of the Gemara about what Eila Mishpatim, again, the hekesh between the Mizbeach and Eila Mishpatim, not just for Dayanim, not just if you're going for Yadin, but for every single person in this room. Every Yid has to know that when it comes to teaching Torah, I don't care if you're a Rebbe, I don't care if you give a Chabura, I don't care if you're a Chavrusa, I don't care if you're teaching if you're a counselor in camp. The Eila Mishpat Masher Tasim Lefneim, learn from the Mizbeach Shleitineg Minag Bizayin. Never be mevazes somebody who you are in a position of authority over, who is entrusted with you the chiyuv of Talmud Torah. You are a role model. You cannot be nayeg minag bizayin. You will kill the person. You have to be nayeg minag derech eretz, like the Mizbeach. That's the hekesh between Me'el Mishpatim and the Parashat HaMizbeach at the end of Yisrael. There's a famous personality. He's one of the heads of art schools. His name is Reb Nosson Sherman. He wrote many, many classical sarim. It's amazing how prolific he is. He wrote the Stone Chumash and the Art Scroll Siddur and all the Machzairim and the amazing. He's very super talented. He's when I was writing my sarim with Art Scroll, some of them he edited b'chvayda b'atzmai. I kept all of his red markings because he's a very, very chashuv person. He's a very talented person. Anyway, he said once that he had a Rebbe growing up, wherever he grew up, and he'll never forget, this is what, I guess, one of the reasons why he wanted to go into chinuch, was that this Rebbe wrote down on the blackboard all the names of the boys in class that were misbehaving. If a guy was eating in class or was schmoozing in class, he would turn around and he would write on the blackboard the person's name, and I guess those were the boys that would miss recess, or those were the boys that would have to write a report or whatever it is. But that's what the Rebbe did. One day, the menal of the yeshiva, the principal, walks into the classroom uninvited, unexpected. And, the principal sometimes walk in and they give like a model lesson or give say some announcements, whatever it is. And all of a sudden, the Rebbe, realizes that there are names on the blackboard of boys that were misbehaving. I guess it said these are the bad boys. And the last thing he wanted to do was to be mevaza these boys in front of the menal. And all the boys saw in the class that while this Manala was giving this model lesson and speaking, the Rebbe, very slowly, without making any big waves, he walks backwards and he stands against the blackboard right where those names were, and he starts going like this against the blackboard and rubbing out all of the names of the boys that were on that list. And the kids that were in that room that noticed this were so touched and were so moved and were so affected by the sensitivity that the Rebbe had to their covet that they wanted to be Rabbeim themselves. How could you not want to be a Rebbe if you see a Rebbe that's such a great Rebbe, that cares so much about the covet and the dignity of every single Talmud? Everyone wanted to be a Rebbe. There's a story that's told about a chassan in Eretz Yisrael, and he was speaking by Yesheva Brachas, and everybody knew he was a great kid and a great catch and a great chassan, and he was speaking by his own Sheva Brachas. He was thanking his parents, thanking his in-laws, and telling, the normal things that you do by Yesheva Brachas. And then at the end of his speech, he says, and I want to thank a certain Rebbe that I had in 5th grade, because he changed my life. And he told the story, and everybody was dazzled by this story. What happened was that there was a boy in the class, it was right after Hanukkah, and he got a beautiful Hanukkah present. He got a watch. And it was not Stam watch, it was a very fancy digital watch with all types of things on it, and it could do everything. It could even tell time. And he, and everybody was looking at it, and he's showing it to people, and it was like a big thing. And then the boys all ran to recess, and this boy didn't want to take his new watch and play ball with it because he didn't want to get it scuffed up. So he left it on his desk and he ran out to recess. When he came back, of course, the watch was gone. And the Rebbe was standing in the hallway during the whole recess, so he knew that there were no janitors that went into the class, no one from other classes. He knew that Mistama, the Ganef, was in the room. One of the boys must have had too big a Yetzirah and pocketed the watch. So he said to the boy, he says, listen, and this boy, Naphtali, whose watch it was freaking out because his parents told him not to take the watch to yeshiva. It's not for yeshiva, it's for home only, and it's going to get stolen, so he's going to have, no, I want to show my friends, and he was, 100%, pushing for this, and now he's going to come home. Yosef Eineno, Binyamin Eineno, he's not going to have the watch. So he was pleading with his Rebbe, you got to find my watch. I cannot go home empty-handed. And so the Rebbe got into action. He says, Rabbi Say, Naphtali's watch was stolen. A lot of times it happens, people, maybe somebody picked it up to look at it and inadvertently put it in his pocket, and, he was absent-minded. Whoever has the watch, cough it over. So nobody budged. And the Rebbe says, I'm going to ask you one more time. Whoever has the watch, just give it to me right now. It's not going to be a bizayin. We understand. People are weak. It's fine. Just give it to me. Naphtali lost his watch. It was stolen. We want it back. Nobody says a word. So he says, okay, you're not leaving me any other option. Every boy in the class line up facing the wall. I'm going to frisk every boy's pocket, and I'm going to find the watch. And at this point, the boy who stole the watch started to really schwitz, because he knew that if he was caught, it would be bizaynus, and he'd be publicly branded a ganef, and his parents would get a call. He might be suspended from yeshiva. He was going crazy. But he was number 3 on the line of boys out of a class of, let's say, 20, 25 boys. And the Rebbe, everybody's just looking straight at the blackboard, straight at the wall. The Rebbe puts his hands, frisks the first boy's pocket, then he goes to the second boy's pocket, and now it's Chaim's turn. And Chaim is going crazy. He's davening. The Gemara says even a ganef davens, they shouldn't get caught. And he puts his hand in Chaim's pocket, takes out the watch. And then he goes to the next boy's pocket. and he frisks every single one of the boys. He doesn't say a word. All he says is, the watch was found, everybody go back to your seat. He was so chas, he was so sensitive to the bizayin of every Talmud. And this chassan said by the Shevrach, that boy was me. The boy who stole the watch was me. He says, and because of that Rebbe, I wanted to be a Rebbe. I wanted to go into chinuch. I wanted to learn Torah. I wanted to do anything that I could to be close and to be like that Rebbe. That's the kayach of Eila Mishpatim Asher Tasim Ufneim. You have to be like a Repreda. You have to be sensitive. You have to have time and patience and love if you want to be a Rebbe, if you want to be in yeshiva, if you want to be a chavrusa, if you want to be a good roommate, a good friend, a good husband, a good father. You need the sensitivity of a Repreda. And you have to have the sensitivity of the Torah Kedosha that says that a Kayin is not allowed to be Noeg Bizayin, even to the Abnei HaMizbeach and Alachas Kama V'Kama, to a human being who has a heart. You're not going to change the person by embarrassing that person. All you're going to do is kill him that way. The way to improve, the way to fix the chesronos, the weaknesses, the foibles of a human being is only through love, is only through sensitivity, is only showing that I care about you, I love you, and I'm going to be patient with you until you're able to be rehabilitated. That's the aside of Eila Mishpatim. That's what we learn from this Parashat. And by the way, that's probably why the Torah says that if the Ganef after 6 years says, I don't want to go out, Ki tayv la'imach, I want ahafti es adaini, es ishti es bani, I'm happy here. Then the Torah says you have to drill a hole in his ear. Oizen sheshama bar Sinai leisignov. The ear that heard, don't be a ganef, and he went and ganefed. You have to, drill a hole through that ear. And every single one of the Mefarshim asked, wait a minute, shouldn't that have been done like 6 years ago when he was busted? He was caught as a ganef 6 years ago, and now 6 years later, now, what happened? 6 years ago he didn't, that year was different? And I think the answer is very simple. Because 6 years ago, the Torah didn't look at him like a ganef. The Torah looked at him as a human being that made a mistake. You're a human being that made a mistake. Let's give you a nice house. Let's make you feel like you're a family member. You're eating like everybody else. You're sleeping like everybody else. You're drinking like everybody else. You're being treated nicely for a change. Maybe we could rehabilitate you. Maybe we could say, he's not really a ganef. He's a human being that made a mistake. 6 years later, that should be enough time to get him back on the street, happy, healthy, whole. But if after 6 years, all he wants to do is stay and mooch off of the taiva of the Torah, and off the benevolence of the Adain, now you're a ganef. Now you're a ganef. Now we see that you weren't even rehabilitated. You didn't learn the lesson of the Torah. The Torah is trying to rehabilitate you, to put you back on the track of life. If you're unwilling to take that leap back into normalcy, now we consider you a ganef. And now you have to have your ear pierced. This is the aside. We don't look at people in the right way. When we look at people after a Parashat Mishpatim, it has to be different. Hi man de boilam avi chasida. You want to be a chassid, you want to be a better person, learn mili de nezikin. If you learn nezikin, you learn mishpatim. It's not just will you be a legal scholar, you'll be a chassid. Because you'll learn through the details of the Torah how not to look at a human being. How not to immediately size up a person based on the Lashon Hara that you heard about them. But see, maybe there's a reason beneath the surface that no one else is looking at, but you notice. Maybe you could say, you know what? Maybe people are saying bad about him, but they don't understand what I understand about him. I know that he's a fine person, but he made a mistake because he Pashut doesn't have money, because he didn't have a good upbringing, because he has no friends. Maybe if I'm friendly with him, maybe I could change him. Maybe I could be chas. Maybe no one ever had the rachmanis that the Torah wants for the Mizbeach. Maybe everybody made him a carbon instead of making him a Mizbeach. And if I could somehow be nice to him, if I could be sweet to him, if I could befriend him, then I could take a human being that's broken and that has mistakes all over him, and I could clean him up, and I could restore him, and I could make him an amazing human being. That's the job of a Rebbe. And that's the job of a friend. And that's the job of a chavrusa. That's the job of a parent. Because we're all dayanim. We're all paskening on people, but we can't paskin so quickly like we tend to do. We have to paskin with a patience. We have to be mesunim badin. We have to be patient and make sure that we're seeing all sides of the person. And only when we are able to see the sweetness and the beauty that lies within are we able to begin making a plan to fix this person's neshama and to improve the entire future of his life. Have a wonderful Shabbos.